the name of our series. Countdown. Why? Because time is running out. Yes. So the topic that we have been studying is the topic of the end times, okay? And I believe that we're living in the beginning of that we're seeing what we talked about weeks ago in Matthew 24, where, there's going to be earthquakes and wars and rumors of wars and all that's going up, but that's just the beginning of things. I believe that's where we are right now. I could be wrong. Christ could tarry for another 1,000 years. Who knows? But I believe that's where we are. And so we've talked about that, and we talked about the tribulation, and we talked about the Antichrist, and we talked about other things. And so we're going to delve deeper. The next 3 weeks, we're going to delve deeper into the tribulation. I told you guys it was going to get bad. Well, we're going to talk about how bad. Okay? So if you guys remember from a couple weeks ago when we talked about the tribulation, and somebody once said that sounds scary, and it is scary, but don't worry, because I've got a word for you after we talk about tonight. So we're going to talk about tonight what we call the 7 seals, not the things that bark and swim. No. Seals. Like in the day when they would write a letter and they would take a seal and they would pour wax on the envelope and they would smash the seal down and seal it up. That kind of seal. That's what we're talking about. And we're going to be in Revelation chapter 6. But before we read our passage, I want to give you some background. Okay? Revelation was written by the Apostle John. Very good. The Apostle John, who was the last living apostle. The others, by the time he wrote the book of Revelation, the others had been martyred. The others had been killed. And he was an older man, and he wrote the book of Revelation. And in chapter 4, John is actually given a vision of the throne room of Christ. And I wish we could go over that, but time does not permit. The throne room is awesome, and he actually describes what it looks like, and he describes what Jesus looks like sitting on his throne, no longer in a humble man form, but in his glorified form on the throne. And he's awesome, and he looks terrifying and cool at the same time. Then in chapter 5, John witnesses a scroll. Now, what's a scroll? Yeah, a really long piece of paper. They had rolled up. They didn't have books back in the day. They didn't have printing presses, and so they wrote on scrolls, so they could fold it up and carry it with them and stuff, and store them and things like that. So he saw in heaven a scroll, and on that scroll was 7 seals sealing the scroll. Now, here's the interesting thing about scrolls. Yeah, back in the day, scrolls were books that they read. Like the whole Bible, the whole Old Testament was written on scrolls. But scrolls were also used for other things. You had a scroll if you went to get married. You needed a marriage certificate. It was usually on a scroll. If you had a deed for your house, it was on a scroll. If you had some other business contract, it was written on a scroll. And oftentimes these scrolls were sealed. And you would, shake hands and everything. And that was your contract, that was your deed, that was your whatever. Well, the scroll in Revelation 5 is the deed to the earth. It is the deed to the earth. And in chapter 6, Jesus, who is the only one worthy to open the scroll, by the way, is going to start opening seal by seal, breaking the seals. And each seal represents an activity, an event that happens on planet Earth. So we jump in to chapter 6. Let's go. Now, I told you before that Revelation has a lot of symbolic language, and I will be explaining to you one view. We talked about the futurist view. That's what I believe. There are other views that other people have of what Revelation means. There's some good people out there who believe differently than me, and that's okay, because this is not an essential. An essential is like Jesus is God. You have to believe Jesus is God, or you're not a Christian. If you believe Jesus is something else besides God, you've got a different kind of religion going on, okay? But this is like a non-essential, okay? So we can disagree on Revelation. That's okay. But here we go. From the futurist point of view, join me in verse 1, chapter 6. Somebody say go. Go. Hey, that was a lot of somebody's. Good. Now, I, being John, watched the Lamb open one of the seals. Who's the Lamb? Jesus. Very good. And I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a voice like thunder, "Come!" Now, living creature. This would go back to Revelation chapter 4 when John's describing the throne room of heaven. Around heaven are 4 living creatures. We call them living creatures because we don't know exactly what they are, besides being some sort of creature that's covered with eyes. Somebody say weird. Yeah, so it's not like a lion or a bear or something like that. It's completely different than anything we've ever known. It's some sort of heavenly creature that we have. I don't know if it's in the angel column or some other heavenly creature column, but it's something else, okay? So there's these 4 living creatures, and for the first 4 seals, each one of them says the word "come" when it's open because they're saying come to the event that's going to take place on the earth. So, verse 2. The creature says, come, and then John says, I looked and behold a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. Okay, here's your first point. You got the notes? Here's your first point. Seal number 1 is the Antichrist's reign. Or the Antichrist, sorry. The Antichrist. Seal number 1 is the Antichrist. Now somebody say, well, wait a minute. Doesn't Jesus ride on a white horse? Yes, okay, yes, Jesus does ride on a white horse, and some have suggested maybe this is Jesus. But the funny thing is, this starts at the beginning of the tribulation, and Jesus doesn't come till the end of the tribulation. And also, the guy in this white horse is given a bow, but no arrows. And I told you that the Antichrist is going to unite the earth. He's going to come conquering the earth, but not with war. So he's got a warlike appearance, but he's not shooting any arrows, not at this time anyway. And so this represents the Antichrist, the beginning of our tribulation, the beginning of what's happening. The first seal's broken. Here comes the Antichrist. We talked a lot about him a few weeks ago, so I'm not going to go into all that. But that is the Antichrist. Now look at verse 3. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say... Let's try that again, okay, because it's a voice like thunder, okay? The second living creature say... All right, very good. And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth so that people should slay one another, and he was given a great sword. What does this rider do? He takes peace from the earth. So seal number 2 in your notes. Seal number 2 is worldwide conflict. Seal number 2 is worldwide conflict. Now, even though the Antichrist is going to unite the earth in a one-world government, he's going to do that without war. War will still come. People are still going to fight. And nations are still going to fight. And it's going to be war. And I told you a few weeks ago that the Antichrist is going to bring war on the Christians. But I don't think that's what this is talking about. Because if you read in verse 4, it says that they're going to slay one another. People are going to be fighting back and forth. So even though the Antichrist has risen, even though there's, quote unquote, unity on the earth, there's still going to be worldwide conflict. People are going to die. It's going to be awful. I think it's going to probably make World War I plus World War II look like nothing. Look like small skirmishes. All right. That's seal number 2. Seal number 3. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say... Try it again. I heard the third living creature say... All right. And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales on his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and wine. And somebody say, huh? All right. The third seal, in your notes, worldwide famine. I'm going to explain all this just a minute. The third seal is worldwide famine. Okay? He says what do you say? A quart of wheat for a denarius. Somebody say, what's a denarius? A denarius is a day's wage. In the Bible times, a denarius was a day's wage. You worked a day, you got paid in a denarius. That was your day's wage. So what he's saying is that a quart of wheat, which is just enough wheat or so to feed one person or possibly to feed a small family, costs a day's wage. So enough food for you for one day, or perhaps enough food for you and your small family for one day, is going to cost a day's wage. Now, I did some rough calculation as to what a day's wage would be, the average day's wage for today, and that's a really hard thing to come to, because you've got people who work for minimum wage who make such and such, and you've got people who work, make thousands of dollars in one day. But let's say it's about $100. Let's say the average daily wage is about $100. Okay? Imagine having to pay your day's wage just to buy food for that day. So in other words, inflation, things are going to go up so high that people are going to be striving just to live another day. Worldwide famine, food costs a fortune, people are going to be striving just to live another day. That's bad.
Let's make minimum wage $15 an hour.
No. All right. So we have worldwide famine. All right. Verse 7. When he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say... All right. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. And they were given authority over 1/4 of the earth to kill with the sword and famine and pestilence and by wild beasts of the earth. You guessed it. Seal number 4 is worldwide death. Worldwide death. Over a fourth of the earth is killed with sword, which we actually see in seal number 2, with famine, which we see in seal number 3, and then added to that is pestilence. What's pestilence?
What's past? I don't know. I don't know. Like plague?
Yeah, like plagues and sickness and things that our hospitals are trying to conquer is going to be like, haha, we conquered you. Pestilence. Think, Black Plague, I don't know. And then wild beasts of the earth, which I thought was really weird. By the way, over a fourth of the earth's what's the earth population right now?
7 billion?
7 billion. So somebody take about a fourth of that.
1.6.
1.6 billion people, and it says over a fourth. So let's just round it up to 2 billion. 2 billion people dead. By sword, by war, by famine, starved to death, by pestilence, they're sick, by wild beasts. It's almost like creation is fighting back against the evil that's in the world. Very, very strange. But worldwide death is going to happen. All right, now we're going to break away from the creatures in heaven. Verse 9. When he opened the fifth seal. Now everybody pay attention because this is weirder than weird. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne. They cried out with a loud voice, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Then they each were given a white robe and told to rest a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been. Somebody say, what's this talking about? All right, what's this talking about? So, he saw under the altar. So, in heaven, in the throne room, there's an altar. And what did they do on altars? Not that kind of altar. Sacrifices, okay? So, what's being represented here are the sacrifices of Christians who were martyred for their faith, martyred for preaching the gospel. And they're crying out with a voice that says, how long before we are avenged? Somebody says, wait a minute, you're not supposed to take vengeance. Okay, yeah, we're not supposed to take vengeance. But God will take vengeance upon his people, or for his people. God is, in fact, in one part of the Bible calls God the Avenger. You thought it was Iron Man. It's God. God is the ultimate avenger, and he will avenge the blood of his saints that was martyred on earth. God is the avenger, and it's okay for God to take vengeance. Because God created life, God can take life. So God's going to avenge those who died. But at this point, look at verse 11. They were each given a white robe, which represents purity, and told to rest a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been. So even during the tribulation, there's going to be, and here it is. Somebody give me a drum roll. Seal number 5 is worldwide persecution. Seal number 5 is worldwide persecution. Christians, and I told you guys this a few weeks ago, that the Antichrist will war against Christians. And I believe, this is just my belief, that this is about when that happens. That Christians on earth are slaughtered because they're preaching the truth and the world doesn't like that. And the Antichrist says, go kill them. So there's a number of Christians that are going to be martyred during the tribulation. All right, verse 12. When he opened the sixth seal, so we've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, now we're at 6. I looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth, and the full moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree shed its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll that is being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, and the great ones, and the generals, and the rich, and the powerful, and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand? Seal number 6, worldwide mega natural disasters. Not just natural disasters, but worldwide mega natural disasters. Ma'am? Yes. Sharknado for real will come true. No. What's going to happen, though, here? First of all, it says there's a great earthquake. Now, this is a personal belief again. I think it's going to be an earthquake that shakes the entire earth. I think it's going to make the Richter, just break the Richter, just shatter it, okay? An earthquake that just shakes the earth. Then the sun's going to become black, and the moon's going to become like blood. Somebody say, what? Okay. The sun is going to become black as the moon will become like blood. So this is just me, but I don't think it's saying that the sun's going to be darkened, because then, like, where's our heat come from? I don't think that the moon's actually going to turn to blood. Now, maybe that will happen. Maybe God is going to supernaturally do some really crazy things with the sun and the moon. But I think that something happens to our sky that darkens everything. Because it even says in here that the sky is going to roll up like a scroll. I think that something supernatural, or not something supernatural, something mega natural disaster, maybe volcanic ash or something, I have no idea, is going to like blot out the sky. Now, that's just my belief, okay? So I could be completely wrong here. Something's going to happen to our sky, and it's going to make the sun look dark, and it's going to make the moon look red, and yeah. It's going to be weird. Mega natural disasters are going to take place on the earth. Does anybody want to be alive during that time? No. Does that sound pretty scary? It does sound pretty scary. But it's going to cause the people of the earth who are left. The people, and it points out a lot of the more powerful people. If you look, it was verse 15. The kings of the earth, the great ones, the generals, the rich and the powerful, and then it says, and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves. So everyone who had been fighting against Christians, everyone who'd been on the side of the Antichrist, is suddenly going to freak out when these mega natural disasters happen and realize we were wrong. And they're going to be terrified, and they should be terrified. All right. Somebody say, what's the seventh seal? Okay. I'm not going to cover it. Actually, I'm going to very briefly cover it. The seventh seal, and this is in your notes, the seventh seal introduces the 7 trumpets. And we will look at that next week. And that's actually found in chapter 8, verses 1 and 2. The seventh seal introduces the 7 trumpets. Somebody say, what's the 7 trumpets? More bad stuff, okay? And we'll get into that next week as we look at the 7 trumpets. Now, as we look about the stuff, let's just go briefly over this. The Antichrist comes to power. The world is in worldwide conflict. It's in worldwide famine, worldwide death, worldwide persecution, worldwide mega natural disasters. Does it sound scary? Yeah, it does. How many times does the Bible say, do not be afraid? Few. A bunch. A bunch. And it says that to people who believe in God. And people who believe in Jesus and whose sins are forgiven have no reason to fear. I told you guys there are theories about the rapture. Remember when the church is taken off the earth and we go to heaven to be with God? We don't know when that's going to happen. It could be before all this stuff happens. It could be in the middle of it. It could be near the end of it. We don't know exactly when the rapture is going to be happening. It's possible we could still be on earth when all these terrible things are going on. And if so, as scary as it will be, we have no reason to fear. The worst thing that could happen to you is death, and that equals heaven. You can live, I heard a pastor say one time, you could live 85 years on earth and be absolutely miserable. But if you're a Christian, you'll die and you'll experience 85 million ages of years in bliss and harmony and with Jesus. Not a bad trade at all. And so I want to leave you with one thing. Matthew 28:20 says, this is Jesus speaking. He says, behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. No matter what we face here on earth, whether we see this stuff from the tribulation or not, Jesus promises to be with us. Jesus promises to take care of us. That may not mean that we live and we're okay and we survive through this. We might not. But He's going to be with us no matter what. And I want you to take comfort in the fact that if you know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, He will be with you no matter what. Whether you live through this life and you don't see the tribulation, or you live through this life and you do, Jesus promises to be with you. And if Jesus is with me, I can face anything. All right. Anybody have any questions? Let me grab my famous chair. Hang on, I can't answer questions until I sit in my chair. Here we go. There. Questions? Answers?
I have a
Ma'am.
So, it's not really like a theological question. I just don't know what to say. So, in verse 13, it says, the stars of the sky fell to the
Oh, I forgot to talk about that. Yeah.
It says winter fruit when shaken by a gale. What is a gale?
Like a big wind. So basically, the stars are going to fall just like the fruit from the fig tree falls. Like the big wind takes a bunch of leaves and fruit and makes it fall. The stars are going to fall. Now, I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot to mention that. When John wrote this, they didn't know what stars were necessarily. Okay, they saw stars as lights in the heavens, and they didn't realize that they're billions of miles away, and there are other suns and galaxies and all things like that, or solar systems and other things like that. So it could refer to like meteor showers. So the stars here could be like a meteor shower because to John that would have looked like stars falling. But maybe it is real stars. I don't know. God could do anything. So
perhaps the natural disasters could be caused by something from space hitting the Earth, and that was just the debris falling off and burning up in the atmosphere.
Yes. Perhaps we are actually visited by aliens.
Well,
I know what you meant. I just took it to the ridiculous.
Independence Day does happen.
That's what it's... No, it's not. Okay. Good question. Any other questions? If Antichrist, rapture, tribulation.
Whenever the Christians come, the rapture
Yes.
happens before
Yes.
tribulation, and people who get saved afterwards, well, can they be saved?
Yeah. In fact, I think one of the reasons why God's allowing the tribulation, because God just doesn't want to bring, punishment to earth, because he's going to throw people in hell who don't accept him. I think the reason for the tribulation is so people become saved, especially Israel, who's going to realize that Jesus was the Messiah, they missed it, and they're going to repent of their sin. I think a lot of Jews are going to be saved during the tribulation.
So, if the rapture does happen before, what do people have to do?
They'll have to go through the tribulation. That's what I believe. I believe personally they'll have to go through the tribulation and either come out on the other side, or if they are killed, then they'll go to heaven. Good question. Anyone else? When I stand up, it's not bad, but when I sit, the light's like... No other questions? Man, you guys were easy tonight. Katie, you got a question? You got like 3, 4... Counterpoint? Let's go!
Is the song "The Four Horsemen" by Metallica accurate?
Of course.
All right.
Do not doubt the theology of Metallica. No.
Can you describe briefly what
Sure.
other Revelation views think of this passage?
Yeah, maybe. I'll do my best. So I'm a futurist, so then there is a historical view, which sees the book of Revelation as having already happened. So they would equate a lot of what happened here to like the fall of Jerusalem, which was in 70 AD, and things like that. So they would say it already happened that way, and they would use a symbolic language to talk about other events that happened throughout human history. So the fall of Jerusalem is the only one I can specifically name, but there are others. There are people who say it's more of a, I think they're called idealists, who believe that it's more, that Revelation here is talking more spiritually. So you're not going to see physical events happening, but there's going to be spiritual forces at work, and we're living in a quote-unquote tribulation right now with everything that Christians are facing. So there's not really an Antichrist, but the spirit of Antichrist that pervades over the world and is tormenting Christians and things like that. And to their point, I mean, Christians are suffering all over the world and being martyred. So, they're... I hate to use the word validity, but I see their point, I guess. However, I just, as the language as I read through it, I can't get away from seeing this as a future occurrence. Good question. Ma'am.
So kind of counterpoint, but also.
Okay.
So if this is supposed to be future occurrence that hasn't even happened for us yet, what is the purpose of John writing a letter to Christians in this day?
Excellent question. Excellent question. The question is, why would John even be given a letter or write this letter about a future that hasn't even happened yet? Yeah, absolutely. I think part of the answer... I think part of the answer is to give Christians a clue that God has a plan. And he unfolds a plan, even though it is veiled with symbolic language. I believe it's to show God does have a plan of what's going to happen at near the end, and God's going to have a plan that's ultimately salvific, specifically for Israel. I believe it's descriptive of the 70th week of Daniel, and we could talk about that further without unraveling all that right now. But I believe, so it's more like showing here's what's going to happen that 70th week that we don't have, that didn't happen yet. I also think that it's one of those things where we'll get kind of like the prophecy from the Old Testament about Jesus, where we'll look back and we'll go, oh, God was right, kind of a thing. Go ahead.
But as the purpose of the genre of a letter, because Revelation is written as a letter to the churches.
Yes.
So the encouragement then that they are to take away from that is that God has a plan. Is that what?
That God has a, yeah.
How it applies to them in their situation, because, like, would that be the underlying principle then? That, like,
I would think, and that God has a plan, so, yeah. And so, and also, if you look back at the specific churches that he wrote to in Revelation 1 through 3, and the different things he addresses with each church, you're doing this good, but you're not doing this well. I think the emphasis there is, get to work and do church the right way. Make disciples like I told you, because I have a plan. It's going to get bad, and you are responsible for making disciples while you're on the earth, while you're doing your thing. I do have a plan. I am in complete control, but this is why I want you to do what you want to do. I want you to save people, or I want you to get out there and disciple and witness for me, so that humanity, the elect of humanity, can be saved.
So you think it was maybe ending the debate on when Jesus was coming back, like kind of giving almost, not because it, it's, like you said, it's veiled, but giving a quasi answer, so like stop worrying about it. This is.
I hadn't thought of that, but I could see that. Sure. I hadn't thought about that, or hadn't read that either, but I can see that being, because there were even people in John's day who was selling all their possessions and their homes and everything and saying, Jesus is coming back tomorrow, so let's all be ready, and then it didn't happen. So that may have been among the purposes. It's a good thought. Did you, wait just a second, did you have a, no?
Mine's related.
Oh, okay, go for it.
When was
Mr.
Revelation
906.
written?
Revelation was,
He was old. So
before 70 AD.
So, were books, scrolls, written at that time? Because my question is, what other way would he get the information out in a society where most everything is passed down orally, besides a letter to all the churches?
Sure.
Where he would start off with an admonition or with encouragement for the churches, and then discuss his vision. It was to 7 different churches, right?
Yeah.
So if he was going to die, God showed him this, and must be a way of continue, like you were saying, continuing the
Right.
oral tradition.
Yeah.
Okay. Asking specifically how the letter is being.
Right. What I'm saying is, to the question of why it would be written as a letter instead of. My question would be, how else? This isn't. Were there books? Would he have written a book that said, "Hey, this is what I got," or would he have written a letter to people so that they could pass on information? You know what I mean? Am I making any sense?
Well, the Bible is written in books and in letters and stuff like that,
So there's a different format that you follow when you're writing a letter than if you're writing a book, because there would have been books and stuff in his time.
That's a question.
And so the fact that he is formatting it, the introduction, as a letter, indicates that it is meant to be read as a letter, and that genre is underlying current or theme within the entire book of Revelation. So, which should help guide and also influence interpretation, because it's meant to be sent as a letter and read orally to the church, not just as a book that's been compiled of information, which has a different carries a different meaning with it.
Yeah. Does that help?
Yes, I guess. I'm just curious about that thought. 'Cause I never thought about the fact that it was written as a
Well, in John's day, there was what they referred to as the Stone Age Internet, where he would actually... No.
Well, there's the Gospels.
Right,
Mhm.
the Gospels are, but then the rest of the entire New Testament is a letter, except
Mhm.
they're letters. So you've got 4 stories, according, books according to 4 different people, and then you've got a bunch more letters.
Yeah.
But I guess,
Yeah. And that does affect interpretation to a degree, is because you have to. One part of interpretation is you have to think about how are the original recipients going to receive this information, and
So the church is young, 70 years after
Yeah.
Christ is killed. How many churches were there? I mean, is he
Yeah.
writing to every church that existed at that time?
No, at that time he was writing specifically to the 7 churches.
Right, but is this 7 churches of like gigantic areas? Like what was Philadelphia? That's the only one I can think of. Is that
Sure.
Is that a region or is that a one city? Or one,
I believe it was a city,
Okay.
but I have to look at that.
Mine then.
Well, like he wrote one to Ephesus. Ephesus was a city.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And you're asking like how big the churches were?
I'm just trying to wrap my mind around the fact that it was a letter and not a book.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Sure. But I mean, in God's plan meant for the church universally.
Right, of
Yeah.
course. But at that time,
Right.
you know, what if the rapture were to happen, you know, the year after he wrote that, and only those 7 churches would have known about it, you know?
Well, then be a part of those 7 churches.
You gotta think that those churches are then influencing other churches, you know,
Mhm.
like in other
Right.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
You got it.
Right, right.
No, good thinking, though. I mean, this is this kind of goes into the canon of the Bible and how it was all put together, and which is a fascinating study. So yeah, but yeah. Emily, did you have a question?
Me?
I thought I saw you raise your hand at one point.
What did the eyeball living creatures look like again?
What did they look like? They look like 4 living creatures. Hang on. Okay. All right. We'll go into a little bit. Okay, so John's in heaven. He's looking at the throne room. Okay. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones were 24 elders. Somebody asked, who are the elders? No idea. Clothed in white garments, wearing golden crowns on their heads. From the thrones came flashes of lightning and rumbles and peals of thunder. And before the throne were burning 7 torches of fire, which are the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne there was in it a sea of glass like crystal. And around the throne and each side of the throne are 4 living creatures, full of eyes in front and back. The first living creature is like a lion. The second living creature is like an ox. The third living creature with the face of a man, and the fourth living creature like an eagle in flight. And the 4 living creatures, each of them had 6 wings, which are full of eyes all around and within, and day and night they never cease to say, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. There they are. One looks like a lion, one looks like a, what was it? Ox. One had the face of a man, and the other looked like an eagle in flight.
My grandpa, or at least there was this monster he called the Eye in his old work basement. So it might be one of them.
What?
It's called the Eye. It was just a glowing light.
Um,
I've seen it.
oh. Yeah, and some of this, when you read some of this, it's like hard to picture, like how full of eyes. What does that mean? Because that to me sounds like something from an alien movie, or you know.
The spaghetti meatball
Yeah.
monster.
That's what it is. No. Good thought so. Anything else? Yeah, I think let's do it again. No. All right, gentlemen, we're going to go across the way for breakout time. Ladies are going to stay here.